It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, October 20th. This week we're going to talk about political dysfunction. You know, the kind of gridlock that prevents work from getting done. And no, we're not discussing Washington, D.C. or Portland. We're going to chat about Eastern Oregon and why the small town of Baker City spent a significant stretch of this year without a city council. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm OPB Managing Editor Ryan Haas.
I'm OPB's Rural Communities reporter, Antonio Sierra.
Okay, Antonio, so you came to me this week with a story about some pretty severe government breakdown, which is somewhat fitting given the big political story in the country at the moment is Republicans' inability to name a new Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C. But again, we're looking out in Baker City, which is a beautiful part of our state. They've been trying to figure out why their local government collapsed, and they've been without a functioning city council for a while. So what happened?
Yeah, so the Baker City Council started as a fully functional city council that was all 7 members were there at the start of the year. They're holding regular meetings and conducting business. The first big development that happened was in July. That's when Mayor Matt Diaz posted an anti-LGBTQ meme on Facebook. This sparked a lot of community pushback and debate. And a few weeks later, he announces he's moving out of town and he's going to resign. So this was obviously a pretty contentious moment, but I spoke to the interim city manager a little while ago, and he said the real dividing line for the city council and for the general public was a public safety fee. They are able to replace Diaz on the city council, but his new appointee and another councilor resign in August. One of them cites a public safety fee controversy, and the other says that they have personal conflicts with the new mayor. That leaves 5 city councilors by September, and then 2 more resign. This pushes the Baker City Council underneath the threshold you need for a quorum. Listeners might be familiar with the term quorum through the Republican walkouts in the legislature.
Right, we've covered that many times.
Yeah, but every governing body has a minimum number of members it needs to do business, and so they have their own quorum requirements. For Baker City, that's 4 members. The remaining 3 councilors tried to appoint replacements, but a group of residents sued to block the move. They said you need a quorum to make appointments, not only to do business. A judge sided with the group, and the final 3 councilors resigned rather than staying on. I spoke with Shane Alderson, a Baker County commissioner who served 2 years on the city council before he was elected to county office in 2022. This was his reasoning for why the council fell apart.
I think there are people that got on that didn't have as much experience at that level that you needed because of the situation with budget and also personality conflicts and just some very poor decisions in personal life.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Alderson is outlining that sounds very accurate to me. It sounds like it was a very chaotic year for the city council. Baker City is this really historic place, and like a lot of rural Oregon communities, there's this tension between preserving its past culture and staying relevant. Baker City has hovered around 10,000 residents for a while, but it's really going to need to keep growing, right?
What I've heard from local officials is that revenue is not keeping up with expenses. Let's take the fire department, for example. They dropped ambulance service last year, and it led to an exodus of staff in the department. The interim city manager I mentioned earlier, John France, he told me that when he was hired in late June, the department didn't have enough firefighters to fill a full shift. The city relied on other departments to help cover the burden. The city council passed the public safety fee to help stabilize the fire and police departments. And while it's politically contentious, France said that he's starting to shore up the fire department. There's still a lot of other problems. When they were putting together the city's budget last spring, they realized they had a $1 million shortfall. France says the city has mounting needs in road repair, equipment replacement, parks maintenance, and a bunch of other core services.
Okay, so they have many, many problems they need to address, but what happens to a town of this size when there are no city councilors to actually address those problems?
I think that for a lot of residents, they probably didn't see too much of a change. City Hall was still open every day, and there wasn't any interruption in services that I'm aware of. But in the background, there were a few things that were falling by the wayside. Because he's working as an interim manager, France said he couldn't fill open positions without city council approval. Because there was no city council to approve them, those jobs have remained vacant. France also told me the city council needs to make a decision about the city manager position. France says he's willing to take the permanent job, but regardless of whether it's him or somebody else, they need to make a decision before his contract runs out at the end of December. Besides all the immediate needs, the council basically lost a month where they could be working on their budget issues.
Okay, so basically earlier this week, the county stepped in to address this. They appointed enough new city councilors to have a quorum, which would allow the city to get back to business, including filling other seats on the council. Can you give us more details on that latest development?
So when everyone left the council, it triggered a state law that gave county commissioners the power to make just enough appointments to get the council running again. Interest was actually pretty high from the community. There were 17 applicants for 4 seats on the council. The 3 commissioners then narrowed the field down to 8 finalists. The commissioners said they prioritized experience in government and business when they were looking at candidates, and their choices reflected that. All the councilors they chose previously served on the council, although none of them were on the council during the collapse. All the councilors were immediately sworn in and are expected to get to work. They'll have to appoint 3 new members so they can fully restore the council. The mayor position is appointed by the council, so they'll also have to choose a new mayor from amongst themselves. All of their terms will expire at the end of 2024, so that means all of their seats will be on the ballot next November.
So, more big changes ahead. I mean, do you think this political debacle will have any long lasting impacts on the town or the region?
The sense I got was that everyone was really concerned about the future of the city. More than half of all Baker County residents live in Baker City, so it has a pretty big influence on the quality of life for people in the county. A lot of the people who applied for appointment told commissioners that they were really disappointed with the last council and wanted to put an end to the dysfunction. One of the new councilors told commissioners that she was concerned that the city could collapse further if the city can't get a handle on basic services. So it seems like the new council will not only be responsible for solving the budget, but also restoring a little bit of faith in the institution.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit here and head southwest from Baker to another old Oregon town with some recent political struggles, John Day. There's even more political acrimony there. Can you tell us about that saga?
I could dedicate a whole other podcast to the situation in John Day. Essentially, many of the city's current employees, the former city manager, and a handful of residents all signed a criminal complaint against Mayor Heather Rookstool. John Day hasn't had a permanent city manager since before Rookstool took office. This group behind the complaint accused her of falsifying documents and deceiving the community so she could run the city herself. And they say that's a violation of the John Day City Charter. Rookstool hasn't publicly responded to the complaint, and the city council is still deep in the search process for a new city manager. Again, I think this is indicative of a larger problem in the area. John Day and Grant County as a whole are shrinking. Grant County was the only county in Oregon to lose population between 2010 and the 2020 census. The people I spoke to in John Day say it's highly divided between residents who want to see the community grow and pursue new opportunities, and conservatives who want to maintain John Day's small town culture.
Yeah, I mean, I see some sort of analogies between these two places and what you're describing. I mean, what do you think these two stories taken together say, Antonio? There's personal attacks and political challenges. which aren't a new thing, but these two are pretty strong examples in more conservative areas of Oregon. What does this say about the issues facing small town governments today?
I've lived in Eastern Oregon for 9 years, and there's definitely a trend I've been noticing. People have skepticism and apathy for the federal and state government, and that's starting to seep down to the local level. Whenever there's dysfunction or corruption at the local level, it just reinforces those feelings. Residents wonder where their tax money is going to, especially since it seems like local infrastructure and services are starting to decay every year. But small town office holders aren't supposed to be faceless bureaucrats or slick politicians. They're your neighbors, or at least someone you have personal knowledge of. That adds a personal level to the conflict. I think most rural towns in Oregon have this existential question about their community's long-term viability, especially if population growth is flat or declining. I think that's where the rub is. As a local elected official, how do you put your community in a position to succeed when the policies you put out are highly divisive? I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that question.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I don't know if there is an easy answer. So let's leave it there for now. Thank you, Antonio. This week's episode was produced by Lauren Daig, and our audio engineer is Stephen Cray. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest, and until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org.